Hello farmers and aspiring farmers. Welcome to Agricultural New Directions, Agribusiness in support of Vision 2030, and my name is Wadzanai Manyore. So in this very episode, we are here in Mashonaland West in Banket at Kombe Farm, being owned by Mr. and Mrs. Pasipanojga, and we are going to be looking at his various enterprises. But in this very episode, it's going to be about barley and wheat harvesting that he produced in May. So in this very episode, we have taken the liberty of inviting Mrs. Wendy Matashu Madzura, an agronomist working with various farmers in different geographical locations of our country here in Zimbabwe. We are looking at barley and wheat harvesting. Wendy, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Wadza. It's always a pleasure to be on this program.
Now I can tell that there is excitement in the air. As we are in the harvesting season, we are looking at issues surrounding yields and how you can protect your yield. In this very episode, I would like you to highlight for our audience there at home the differences or the similarities between wheat and barley. I understand that they are established roughly during the same time and also harvested during roughly the same time. Can you highlight the similarities and the differences?
Thank you so much for that pertinent question. Indeed, all that starts well surely ends well. And we are seeing that we are continuing as a country on that positive trajectory of increasing our wheat production. Did you know, Azza, that last year we managed to achieve over 375,000 metric tons of wheat, which is to say now we are food or flour self-sufficient as a country. So this year we have established over 90,000 hectares of wheat, which is a record even since the start of wheat production in the country. So the target yield is above 400,000 metric tons, and as a country we consume about 360,000 metric tons of wheat annually. So that's quite commendable. So back to your question where you were asking about the differences between barley and wheat. There are not many differences between the two, as they are both within the same family of cereals which are produced during the winter crop. So the important thing to note is that they are produced for different end uses. So when you're looking at barley, it's mostly produced for beer brewing, which is why it's mostly done under contract farming. So it's under different contractors in the country. So if you're going to be doing barley, you need to secure the market first. You can't just establish a barley crop and then start looking for the market when it's at this stage, this beautiful golden stage, because you might not be able to secure the market. So with barley, you need for it to be under contract. Then when you look at wheat, you have a wide range of options of things that can be done with the wheat, which include you can also make bread, you can make flour, it can also be used for other uses in terms of confectionaries that can be done in the market. So wheat has a wider range. But in terms of production, when you look at barley and wheat, they are both produced at the same time, under the same climatic environment, which is to say the winter period is what we want. So the crop that we are seeing today of barley and wheat was established during the peak or ideal period of wheat and barley production, which ranges from the 1st to the 15th of May. Yes, we had a crop which went on in terms of establishment until the end of May, early June, but that is the critical period. So in terms of establishment, the establishment is similar. The management for fertility, the nutrition is similar, and also in terms of the weeds and pest pressure that we expect in wheat and barley, they are also quite similar. But the end result is what's different. Where are you going to take the produce to the market, and who is the end consumer of the product?
Thank you so much, Wendy, for such a detailed presentation on that. Now as we move forward, Wendy, you'll find that in as much as we are excited, we are harvesting, we are looking at our yields, which translate to money, to cash in our pockets. In as much as we are excited, I want you to touch on harvesting tips that you might want to emphasize for our audience there at home.
Ipapo Wadza wauya nenyaya yakanaka nditendere kuti ndinyatsotaura nemutauro wedu chaiwo. Varimi woye, hatidi kuti tiputse chirongo tasvika. Hino kana tisati takohwa tinenge tagonei. Saka zvakakosha kuti ticherechedze zviga, Wadza, zviga zvinodiwa kuti murimi azive kuti anosvika pakukohwa zvakanaka here. We are seeing that this year we have a wheat crop which is at different stages of development and of growth and of maturity. So we have a crop like this one which was established early, which is now at the maturity stage, and it has dried down to the desired moisture content, which for wheat will range from around 12.5 to around 13-14% for them to start harvesting. And then it also depends on their market at which they are sending their wheat. So in terms of the harvesting tips, for those farmers who have a late crop, which is still maybe at the last stages of irrigation, we want to emphasize the importance of not terminating irrigation prematurely. Why? This will result in your crop having some shriveled grain, and the quality will be reduced, even the falling numbers and the weight of the grain will also be affected. So we want to conscientize our farmers for them to irrigate until the very last stage. When we talk about the last stage of irrigation, the farmer can be also guided by the outlook of the crop. When it has turned into a golden brown color, yes, it means that it's closer to the days of maturity. But in some instances, you might have a few stalks in the field which might still have the green color. So you need to check in terms of the peduncle, which is the area, the neck area, just below the stalk there, where the stalk meets the head of the stem. So here you will see that that's where your farmer will need to check and see if it turns yellow or brown on that end. Then it means you are at the physiological maturity stage and the dry down stage that is desired for you to start harvesting. When you stop irrigation prematurely, it means that your crop, in terms of the yield and the quality of flour that is going to come out, will also be affected. But there is a give and take situation that is there.
Yes.
Why? Because the farmer is also chasing the weather.
Yes.
The farmer wants to harvest before the onset of the rains. So you need to strike a balance. In some instances, you see that maybe there are some areas where there was maybe excess nitrogen which was there. Maybe it's an ant-hill area which might still be green. You might make a conscious decision to stop irrigation at that time, so that at least you hasten the dry down of the crop and you can come in before the flash rains. If you get a lot of those flash rains, they will also affect and start the sprouting process of your wheat, and then it will affect the quality. Then we also want to talk about the equipment.
Yes.
If you know that you're going to be hiring the equipment that you need to use, as we are seeing here at Kombe Farm, everything is on track. You don't want the harvester to go into the field and harvest and then to have to stop and wait for the truck which has gone to Banket or Chinoi to come back, or the truck is not even there on the cards. So you need to make sure that everything is well lined up. When the harvester is in the field, make sure that you have hired on time when before the onset of harvesting. And also the trucks, if you're going to straight to the market, if you're going to be storing the grain to check on the market forces before you're going to the market, you need to make sure that the storage facility is well cleaned, well aerated, and everything is done, so that the next crop which is coming in is not going to meet the previous season's crop, so that you also don't have any challenges of weevil infestation and any storage pests that might come in. So that's about the management of your harvesting. And when you're harvesting as well, you need to make sure that you are also following up and checking, so that you don't incur losses during harvesting, whereby maybe some of the crop might have lodged in the field. You need to also glean. The harvester, the operator of the harvester, needs to make sure that he's gleaning and picking everything, because every grain counts, so you don't need to leave anything to chance.
Now, Wendy, in a snippet as we close this segment, I want us to look at issues surrounding the yield per hectare. What could be the yield that we are looking at, barley and wheat per hectare?
So we want to talk about the yield that you can get between your barley and your wheat.
Yes.
But it also boils down to the management that the farmer will have employed, which we are also going to be hearing from this particular farmer. And I can say proudly, looking at the outlook of the crop that we are seeing here and the management, having followed this crop from establishment to this stage, I can say they will get yields of well above 8 tons per hectare on their best blocks. And then yes, the field is not the same. It's rare for you to find a field that is 100% the same, that has the same soil type, the same environment or topography. So that also speaks to the yield that you get. You might get some areas giving you 5, 6 tons, 7 tons, but on their first blocks, and because of their optimum good agronomic practices that they employed at this particular farm, they will get around 8 tons per hectare as an average. And then it will also, they'll do the mathematics with those areas that might not be looking good, and they might land at around 7.5 tons per hectare, give or take.
Yes, thank you so much, Wendy, for that. We're going to go on a short commercial break. We'll be right back with this and more in the second segment. Stay tuned. Thank you, Zimbabwe, for staying tuned to Agricultural New Directions, Agribusiness. We are here in the second segment of your program. Now, earlier on, before into the break, I was joined by Wendy Matashu Madzura, an agronomist, who was just telling us in terms of how wheat and barley is similar, or some even of the differences that she highlighted on, and how you can ensure that as a farmer, you are profitable and sustainable within your venture. Now, viewers, we encourage you to be a part of these conversations. Feel free to get in touch with the producer, Wadzanai Manyore. It's on 0772 807 507. 0806. Alternatively, you can like our Facebook page, Agribusiness with Wadzanai. Leave your comments and suggestions and make a follow-up on this episode and more on our YouTube channel, Agribusiness with Wadzanai. We are also now available on X, formerly known as Twitter. It's at Agribusiness 110. Now, in this very segment, we have reserved it for the owners of this farm, Mr. Pasipanojga. He is going to be telling us in terms of his diversification and other enterprises that he has here on his farm. Pasipanojga, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Wadza. Greetings, viewers.
As we get into our discussion, can you talk to us in terms of other enterprises, the other diversifications that you are involved in to ensure that your farm is a full setup?
Okay, thank you. Thank you again. Our enterprise is actually composed of a number of activities. When it comes to cropping, we do tobacco to the extent of around 160 hectares. We also do maize to the extent of about 300 hectares. We also do soya to the extent of about 200 hectares, and also do the winter crop, which we are looking at now, which is again to the extent of about 300 hectares in total, but composed of about 200 hectares of barley and about 100 hectares of wheat.
Okay, now Pasipanojga, you'd find that our wheat and barley here in Zimbabwe is established during winter, which is one of the driest seasons if you look at our cropping calendar here in Zimbabwe, meaning you did invest in irrigation. Can you talk to us in terms of your investment in irrigation and the modes of irrigation that you have?
Basically, in this climate of ours, it's actually very commendable that we go irrigation, so that we can achieve at least two crops per annum. So in that way, we started off irrigating using some overhead pipes, but they had a lot of challenges to do with leakages, to do with management. The management of irrigation itself is very cumbersome. So by introducing center pivot irrigation, we found out that it was very, very economic, and we saved a lot in terms of even labor, in terms of energy, in terms of wastage again, and even management of the entire irrigation system. So basically for us, we found out that it was much better for us to install irrigation systems wherever we are doing our cropping programs. So that way, you find out we have extended from the early 2000s from about 32 hectares of irrigation under overhead pipes, and then the major development started in 2013 when we installed our first pivot.
Okay.
And that first pivot then was about 20 hectare pivot, and over the years we've increased the area under irrigation. Up to now, the hectares that we can irrigate under pivot is close to 700 hectares. So basically we have found out that gives us the yield that we so need, both in winter and summer. So basically, for me, I wouldn't do any cropping where I cannot irrigate.
Now, Pasipanojga, off record, when we were driving to this place, you were talking to us in terms of the importance of being timeliness within agriculture, just as being maybe a point of emphasis to those aspiring farmers who might be watching. Talk to us in terms of timeliness in agriculture.
That's very key. When it comes to agriculture, we are dealing with crops. These crops normally respond to the outside atmospheric conditions, and those conditions will determine the yields. Those conditions will determine the growth of the crops that we're dealing with. So it is very important that we make sure that we plant the right time. For wheat and barley, normally for us we try to make it between the 1st and the 15th of May, mainly because if we do it before the 1st of May, we risk frost damage. And if we do it again much later than that, we risk rain damage. So basically, as far as the crop is concerned, we normally go into those time frames. And also if you do that, we normally get our yields which are in as expected. And also for the summer cropping, we're looking at maize and soyas. Maize, our window normally starts from October right up to middle of December. Then we cut off. For soyas, we normally start from around the 15th of November, thereabout, again to about the 15th of December, and then we cut off.
Okay.
And if you manage to make it to those dates, normally you find out you get the desired yields.
Okay, finally, as we close this segment, you are working with your children, you are working as a family, which speaks to creation of generational wealth, a notion that is not very common within our black society as black farmers. Your parting words, your sentiments, your word of advice and recommendations to our audience, to the parents there with their children within their farms, in terms of working as a family unit, a father working with his sons, as we close.
It is very key that we pass on the stick, we pass on the baton. Basically, we need to, as I grow old, there are some activities that I cannot partake. And at the same time, my children, as they come in, they fill up the space and take the baton on. And as a country as well, we move on in the production of our crops or food production, as it were.
Thank you so much, Wapas Panojika, for taking your time to make an appearance on Agricultural New Directions, Agribusiness in support of Vision 2030.
Thank you.
Now, viewers, we're going to go on a short commercial break. We'll be right back with this and more in the third and final segment. Stay tuned. Thank you, Zimbabwe, for staying tuned to Agricultural New Directions, Agribusiness in support of Vision 2030. We are here in the third and final segment of your program, where we are looking at barley and wheat harvesting here in Zimbabwe. You would find that this segment, we normally reserve it for issues surrounding marketing, post-harvest maintenance, and how to reduce your losses as you head towards going to the market. Can you talk to our audience there at home in terms of maintenance of the quality parameters, those that they need to take cognizance of so that they get a better grade which pays better at the market?
Indeed, in any farming venture, it's important for us to look at the qualitative and the quantitative yield. So when we come to wheat, the quality comes from, in terms of the parameters that are looked at the market, and they include the protein content that the wheat grain is going to give. So the minimum protein content that is required for you to get into the premium grade, the grade for those farmers, the esteemed farmers who are doing well, is 11%. And we are hearing here that the few trucks that have gone to the market, to GMB and the other markets where the wheat crop and the barley are going, is getting premium, which is above 11, and they're even getting above 12%, which is to say, with varieties like Select, what is the challenge in farmers getting 13% in terms of their protein content? It's quite achievable. So that's what we are seeing in terms of the parameters of the quality for protein. Then we also look at the taste density. When we talk about the taste density, it speaks to the quality of the flour that you're going to get from the wheat when it's processed. So the flour quality, when you have a percentage of 75 kgs per hectoliter, is the premium one that you want. So it also speaks to you getting the premium grade. Then we talk about the falling numbers. So the falling numbers have something to do with the sprouting, with the weight of the grain. So it also speaks to when you establish your crop for you to get the optimum in terms of the taste density, in terms of the falling numbers of the wheat that the farmer will have established. So it also speaks to the management, because some of it has to do with the nutrition that you are going to employ. When are you going to come in with your top dressing? Are you applying at the right time? Some farmers apply in splits, maybe it's urea or AN. Then they come in again with another additional ammonium sulfate or AN to apply on the crop, so that they boost in terms of the quality, in terms of the protein that they're going to get, and the other parameters that we have just highlighted.
Now, when you would find that standing in this field, it is a beautiful crop that is headed towards going to the market. However, there are still threats that might attack or cause damage to this wheat. We are looking at veld fires, we are looking at the early rains that causes some damages. Can you talk to us in terms of how you can curb those risks, or how you can manage your wheat to ensure that as you head to the market, you are going with everything that you produce? Nothing is going to be left in the field, or nothing is going to be discarded or rejected when you go to the market.
Thank you so much, Wadza. While you were speaking there, I was just also opening one head here. It's a beautiful, beautiful crop indeed. And we are seeing that this is just one head that I'm holding. And the number of grains that we are getting, plum-sized grains of wheat, is commendable, which is to say they will be well above 70 seeds or grains per plant, and it speaks to the yield that they get. It also speaks to the number of spikelets and the size of the spike, which is the head that the farmer had.
Yes.
So coming back to the traits that we were talking about, we would like to also just take a minute to appreciate the crop that we are seeing here.
Yes.
Check out the density. There is no road. You can't even see the flow of the crop, which is to say they established the right way and the right time. But it's also a danger, because if you light a matchstick in this particular field, it will go up in flames in no time. So it's important for us to be cautious in terms of what we are doing around the area where we've established our wheat. We don't want any runaway veiled fires to be getting into this crop and affecting the yield that the farmer was going to get. We also want to talk about the importance of having a fire guard around the field. You need to make sure that there is no area which is a threat in terms of bringing about a veiled fire, which is also going to reduce or affect the quality of our crop and also the quantity that we are going to get. So veiled fires are a major threat, especially at this time. With the heat units that we are getting, we are finding that a lot of veiled fires are being started deliberately or by default. So it's important for us to be on top of the situation in terms of managing veiled fires. We don't want to incur any losses by losing any hectarage to fire. So our farmers are implored on to do that in terms of management.
Okay. Can you touch briefly in terms of the early rains that might come to those farmers who are going to be harvesting their wheat late, given that they also have established it maybe during the later weeks of May or early June?
Indeed, with climate change, we are also seeing that the unforeseen weather factors that include a false start to the season are the things that our farmers are also seeing as they are producing their different crops. So in terms of the early rains, we implore on our farmers to be on guard. They should be knocking on the 10 to 3-day weather forecasts that are going to be provided by the Meteorological Services Department, so that we are also guided accordingly. Because the seasonal forecast is more broad and it covers the whole season. But if you are also going to check on the regular data, which is going to be provided, you won't be found wanting. If you can then harvest within the next week or two to avoid the rains that are coming, then you can do that, provided your crop is dry enough for you to maintain the quality.
Recently, there's been calls from our line Ministry of Lands, Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Rural Development, where they were talking to us in terms of conservation agriculture, which speaks instead of burning this, you can bale it and send it to livestock. Your sentiments, your word of advice, your parting words and recommendations as we close this segment.
Thank you so much, Wadza. As we close this segment and this program, indeed, I would like to just invite our farmers to also take heed of advice. It's important for us to understand the importance of us then also moving with the sustainable development goals and making sure that we are aligning to conservation farming practices, whether at a small scale or a large scale. So when you are doing large-scale production like what we are seeing here, areas of above 500 hectares of production, it's important for you to then also employ such technologies that improve your farming efficiencies, and conservation is one such. You can come in with a reaper, particularly in this field. Since we are seeing the healthy straws that we are seeing in this field, they'll come in with a baler initially, then they'll make some hay bales for their livestock. And then they'll also make some hay bales for future use. Maybe they want to do some mulching of some particular horticultural project that they'll be doing. So after baling, you then come in with your reaper. Then you just open some lines or rows where you want to plant, and then your planter will come in and follow directly on top of the ribbed rows, so that you're also not just disturbing the area unnecessarily. And then the stalks that will remain in the field become the mulch, and then you also then conserve the moisture that you get. Then on top of that, you can use specialized equipment like no-till or strip-till planters, which you can also then just come in and plant where you're just going to put your crop without even doing some land preparation. And then the resource-constrained or small-scale farmers can also use methods like the digging of holes, the Pumvudza method. It's also a method that farmers can use. Now we are seeing that wheat is not only a commercial crop. So we have some communal farmers who have established wheat on their irrigable area. So those farmers, after it's harvesting, they can get the mulch from the stalks and then the store off of the wheat, and then they can dig the holes or do other conservation practices that improve their efficiency.
It was a pleasure having you with us here on our program, Wendy.
Thank you so much, Wadza. This wheat crop is already in the bag. We are looking forward to the next winter wheat farming season. It also starts with proper planning and starting the right way.
From me, your host, Zanai Manyore. I'm also on Instagram. It's a W Manyore. And the crew behind the scenes. Have yourselves a fabulous evening. Thank you for watching.